True North Racing back at it with part 2. We are continuing to egg Sheldon on with questions, picking away at why he thinks he's a race car driver. Stay tuned as we are going to give away some True North Racing swag. Take the time to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and don't forget to click subscribe on our YouTube channel. We would like to thank our supporters: Nexen Tire, Vivid Lumens Industries, ADS Racing Shocks, Coyote boltless bead-lock, Dirty Life Racing Wheels, TMR Customs, Clayton Off-Road, Warren Industries, and to our newest supporter, NorthRidge 4x4 Canada.
Just around Grand Prairie here, just trail cruising, because all we have is quad trails and stuff, right? So I mean, we drive our Jeeps on them and stuff, but we're out in the car driving these trails, and it's just trees and it's windy and stuff. And he told me, he says, I can tell that you have a good feel for the car because you know where the corners are, because we're not hitting every tree as we go around, right? So, and it's the same way with the rocks. You get in there, like, you got to know where the corners in your car are, right? So yeah, even though it's hard to see, that was when it was really bad. It's better now. I lifted the seat up and stuff, but once we get that nose cut down a little bit, and you know, I can see how the mid-engine cars have a really big advantage because they're sitting right out front there. But yeah, the biggest thing is, you know, I got, you know, 25 years of off-roading experience, just Jeeping and wheeling full-size trucks, whatever, Jeeps, and it's just tire placement. You got to know where your tires are, where they got to go to get you over the stuff. And visibility is a huge thing. So
yeah. So if money wasn't the issue, what would you do to that car to make it better?
Horsepower.
So before
this video, horsepower, you gotta beef everything up, right? So
I was gonna say, just before this video started, before we actually started recording, as we were just shooting the shit here, we talked about horsepower almost being like a crutch to some of the guys out there.
It is, yeah,
because they're just blowing things up all over the place.
Yeah.
Again, it's what can you use, right? Like if all it does is just break your axle shafts, or you break ring and pinions, or what, like, you're gonna find that weak spot, right? So, like, yeah, you have to have, like, horsepower is great, but it's only if you can actually use it.
So what would you say?
The problem is a lot of the courses that we race on, I mean, horsepower is awesome. You need it. Say Tail Creek, to get up to speed on that one whoop section, you need horsepower. And I don't have that horsepower right now. I cannot get fast enough to get up on top of those whoops, so I have to go slower through. You have too much horsepower, now you're breaking everything. So you got to keep upgrading stuff, right? So yeah, if you had unlimited money, more horsepower, give me horsepower.
So what would you say would you like as an optimal horsepower for your car? For this car sitting right behind you, deckled up in all of our beautiful swag and sponsors.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I would like to get around the 500 right now.
I think that's a good number. That's what I'd say too, because that's an LQ4 truck motor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's got like 330,
so we're
I think, stock.
It's I mean, it's tuned up here now, so I mean, Blaine did a little bit of stuff to it. We have plans here coming up this winter to do some stuff to it. So I mean, it's probably around 400. It's a stock. I call it a stock 6 liter is all I call it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit healthier than a stock 6 liter, but I mean, that's pretty much all it is. It's an iron head 6 liter.
I mean, it does sound like a grain truck going on a racetrack. So
I think
it did pass you, Doug. In Cornell, it did pass you.
I just had a faster lap time though, so I'll keep that.
No, I think you're right though, Sheldon. Like, I think between like 500 to 600, because you got to think, and I guess I'm talking kind of like crank horsepower, like, because you figure all the parasitic losses you get going through a heavy duty drivetrain, like most cars, including yours, are running, right? Like you're not going to put down 500 at the wheel. Well, you could if you had 800 at the crank, you could probably maybe get 500 to the wheels. But yeah, I think that's I think 5 at the crank would be a good number.
Well, I made about 550 in mine. It was about right to Tail Creek.
Yeah.
So Sheldon, is this car, do you think it's going to win the races in the desert, or is it going to win the races in the rocks?
Rocks. Sorry.
That is such a, I hate that question because it doesn't matter. I mean, so much can happen in the desert and so much can happen in the rocks. And if you're not racing in the desert, then it doesn't matter, right?
Well, you got to finish
We're
the
along-
desert. You got to finish the desert to get to the rocks.
We're a long ways from the desert. We can't even get to the desert right now.
This is true.
So if you go to our local courses, I mean, it's we've got some rocks and we've got some short course racing, we got some jumps, we got some rough stuff. It's all about endurance. You can pre-run rocks all you want. And this goes back to our previous conversation about as soon as you get to the rocks, there's guys flipped over all over the place. So if you're a wheeler and you know how to get through the rocks, it's whatever. You get to the rocks, you deal with the rocks when you get there. If your car is built to handle rocks, you're skidded up, you got reinforcement where you need it, you got a good spotter, you got a good driver, you can get through the rocks. You can screw up really bad in the desert.
Yeah.
Really bad. You're going at speed and you hit some stuff and you can get messed up really bad. You can kill people in the desert. You're not going to die in the rocks.
No.
So, I mean, that's a pretty loaded question.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of this. This whole adventure of tonight is to basically throw you the loaded questions to see how you answer them. So how much?
That's how I feel when we go down to King of the Hammers.
Yeah.
We like to run the desert sections because who cares when you get to the rocks? You never know what you're going to see. It's a bunch of rocks and rolled over race cars. You got to drive over them to get there. So that's where our wheeling background comes in. How do we get through it? We just get through it and then we get back out in the desert.
Well, and I think, as we've seen, is you can sit there and you can start a rock trail. We've gone and pre-ran rock trails, and the local wheelers come out and they wheel it, up until like all night. And by the time we go out there the next day, that is a completely different trail. It doesn't even exist as to what we pre-ran with it yesterday.
And the same thing with pre-running rock trails with non-race cars. Doesn't make sense to me either, because you can take an old Toyota pickup truck chassis that doesn't weigh anything. It weighs 2,500 pounds and drive it up backdoor like nothing. You take a 5,000, 6,000 pound race car, you're not getting it up backdoor. So it's all different. Like you could just, the rocks, you got to deal with it as you get to it. But that same 2,500 pound Toyota is not going to do 100 miles an hour through the desert.
No. So with everything you've got set up on your car, you've got it set up to basically carry enough fuel for pit to pit, or do you got enough fuel to basically skip pits?
I got lots of fuel. With the horsepower that I have and the injectors I'm running, I could drive all day. I just got to get to the end of the line.
Yeah. Could you do all of King of Hammers, 180 miles?
I think so.
140.
140 to 180.
I'd probably feel up there. I'd feel up, but when we raced Tail Creek, I had just under half a tank. I did 10 laps out of 12 and I had just under half a tank.
You barely burned any fuel.
I know. And I was right there. I was hanging with everybody, right? Yeah. You don't have that crazy horsepower. I'm not losing control in the corners. I'm driving the course.
Tonight you've talked about quite a few times that it's an endurance race. What we do is endurance racing. I want to try and expand on that a little bit. How do you feel it's endurance racing? Because, you got what they classify as King of the Hammers is the toughest one-day off-road race in the world, right? We look at Tail Creek and, you got 50% of the field feels it's a sprint race. You got a bunch of guys who are just trying to sprint to the finish line. So when you're talking about endurance racing, how do you see it as endurance racing?
You just have to keep it together. I mean, there's drag racing, you 5 seconds, it's over. You got mud bogging, you got hill and hole, all that stuff. It's just quick, short bursts, right? You take any of those and they've done it, they take they take those egg tire guys and they try and throw them around on the course. They look ridiculous going around on the course. They look good doing what they're supposed to do. You throw them on a race course and, you know, they're slow and cumbersome, right? You got to go fast for a long amount of time. That's an endurance race, right? I mean, it's not like the car where you're going for days on end. I mean, that's an extreme race for sure. It's endurance. You have to endure the whole race. You have to get through it. If you go hard retard right off the bat, you're broken in the first 5 miles.
What are you running for diffs in yours?
My axles were built by Lost Off-Road. They're 9-inch center section, F550 front outers, and Sterling 10.25 rears.
So you're running Ford metric pattern then in yours?
Yeah, it's a Ford 9-inch center section,
What are you running for your bolt pattern on your tires?
8 lug,
8 lug metric
8 on 6.5.
or 8 on 6.5. Okay.
Okay, so not 8 on 170, which is the forward bolt pattern.
No, because 8 on 165 would be 8 on 6.5, right?
Yeah.
The metric conversion, something like that.
Yeah.
It's
mean-
8 on 6.5, which is
So
common
we've watched the 9-inch just work. It just works. Not a lot of issues with them. Doug, I think you ran 9-inch as well.
10-inch in the front and the Curry 70 in the back of mine.
And then Alex, you run 9-inch.
Yeah, I've got.
And I mean, they work. Not a lot of problems with them. So I mean, good choice. I mean, 10. You have a 10.5 in the rear, Sheldon.
what?
You have a 10.5 in the rear.
No, it's a 9-inch center section with Sterling axle shafts.
Oh, okay. Sorry, misunderstood that. So
They're total hybrid. Chris Credit from Lost Off-Road built these back in 2011. They were a hybrid axle.
yeah.
So like I said, they're F550 outers on the front, Sterling axles on the back with strange 9-inch center sections. Probably never see them out there ever anywhere. So I'm a little concerned about that when I start breaking stuff. What else you got?
I got a question for you. Who's going to be sitting next to you at KOH?
Not sure yet. I know Blaine's always expressed that he doesn't really want to be in the car. He'd rather be out diagnosing and work in the pits. So we'll see if he actually wants to race this year, or my kids are getting older too. They've been huge KOH fans. So
And I know Curtis is looking for a new co-driver seat for EMC racing, so you have some good experience co-driving.
I'm gonna run it a couple of days before you, so I'll know the course.
I don't know if you're that desperate, Sheldon, but I mean, an option.
I mean, we need a couple more phone books underneath that seat so I can at least see the GPS.
Yeah, it would be awesome to put you in there in Blaine's seat. That'd be great. I wasn't sure if you had anyone picked out or not. So
no, I'm sure somebody will get in.
I'm sure somebody will be around. I'll cook you some bacon, try and sweeten you up.
Nice.
I'll take the pit. I'll take the pain. So you had an 8274 winch on the front of that thing. Now you've come to a realization about that winch.
I don't know. We broke the top off it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. We like the idea of the 8274. It's fast. It's strong. It works great. It didn't like the whoops at Tail Creek though, because the top broke off. It was broken before, like it had been welded back together. So I'm not faulting the 8274 at all. What I'm probably going to go do is a smaller worn winch in the front, because we are going to slope the front of that car down a little bit more. We're going to tip the radiator down, and we're going to have to go with a smaller winch. So
You gonna go with one of the RC winches, or are you gonna get something with a bigger spool?
No, I think an RC one should probably be good. It's not stock class, Alex. We don't have to winch as much, right?
Until you do. So
You gotta win your other cars out of the way, though.
Have you ever co-driven in the stock class?
no,
Okay, you winch a lot.
I
You get out at the bottom and you don't get back in the car to the top.
So
And I love the stock class. Don't get me wrong. I love the stock class. I love everything it stands for. It's awesome to be able to take those vehicles out there and run those rock trails and run the desert. And we hit 101 miles an hour across Emerson Dry Lake Bed in Alex's 4675. And I think that's probably one of the fastest stock class speeds, because they did a questionnaire. What's your fastest? And I don't think anybody else got to 101.
No,
But still, there's a lot of work getting those stock cars through those trails.
yeah, I want to say I think I saw 83 or 87 was the next closest, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
We were winding up. We were right at the end. He's like, "Let me know when we hit 100." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, there's 100." We hit 101, and we had to get on the brakes because that was the end of it.
There was no more like
But it was
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
But it was going through my mind. I'm like, "We're gonna die. Like, if something happens here and we get into a roll, we're gonna die." That's it. This thing was not meant to go this fast on 35-inch tires.
No. Yeah.
No, I mean unbalanced tires with bead locks, and they don't even like being balanced.
I mean,
It
they
did
were
it
at
like
least
a
new
champ,
tires.
right? I'd do it again. I'd totally do that again. That was fun.
I got to get 102 next time. That's the goal.
Yeah. Maybe if you get Curtis co-driver for he weighs a little bit less than me.
Yeah, a little bit.
You get another mile an hour.
Yeah, that's
You're cutting the shock hoops down, gonna change out the winch. Do you know how much your car weighs without telling us how much your car weighs?
That sounds like a TikTok video.
Well, it's kind of I'm gonna lead into the discussion because I want to see
if he starts doing this stupid thing, I'm gonna just plug off.
Yeah.
We should all just do it right now. Hey,
Yeah, no. It's more of one of these things of I'm gonna gather a hat and I'm gonna gather a t-shirt and we're gonna try and have a guessing game on your car. Thank you to all the True North racing fans and those who support us. Keep watching for part 3.